amount of time. And if it turns out that we need to take some more time with this, we will definitely find a time to do that. So enough from me, and I'd like to just go around the room here and have all of my colleagues introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about who they are and what they do, and we'll start with Hillary.
Hi, I'm Hillary Herndon. I teach viola at the University of Tennessee, and happy to be here.
Okay. Josh.
I'm Josh Bynum. I'm the trombone professor at the University of Georgia.
Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Gregory Lee, and I teach violin at the University of Oklahoma.
Wonderful. So when we first started to conceive this series, we were trying to figure out a good balance between, talking to our conductors and getting some of our alumni engaged and streaming concerts, and then also thinking about the 100 or so students we have doing our virtual program this summer, right? And of course, we all didn't expect to be doing our seminars in this way. We expected to be on the mountain. But I really wanted to try to get a chance to have a candid and as detailed as we can discussion about the college admission and audition process from different perspectives. We all teach at different institutions and obviously play different instruments and engage with students in a range of ways. And so I'm going to kind of open up to the floor these first couple of questions. And the first one, talking specifically right now to undergraduates. And if you could think about this too from the framework of a teacher working with a high school student. So, a high school kid looking for a college program, what are some of the pieces of advice that you give to those students and maybe to their teacher to help them connect with a school? And just since we went in this order, the introductions, we'll start, Hillary, if you want to take that one first.
Sure. Boy, there's lots of advice. my first thought is start early for this process. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see are students waiting until they're already seniors in high school to start thinking about this, or maybe right before their senior year. You should start earlier. Part of this is music degrees. When you go to school for music, your degree is jam-packed with activities. And if you want to graduate in 4 years, you really have to start your freshman semester as a music major. And you have to audition for a music major degree, which happens in the spring of your senior year in high school. So you need to be prepared for that audition, in the fall. You need to be preparing for that, which means it's not the time to be thinking, where should I apply? You need to have already decided where you were going to apply at that point. And so start really early. And to me, the most important aspect for a performance major is going to be their teacher relationship. So you need to go find teachers. And the only way the best way, maybe it's not the only way, but the best way to know that is to go interact with those teachers, to have some lessons and to try people out. So go to summer festivals to work with somebody for a month. Take a visit to a school that you're considering and arrange to have a lesson with that teacher. You don't have to wait until your senior year to do that. You can start doing that in your sophomore, even freshman year, if you're even considering it, just to have the experience of getting to know these people and narrowing down where you might apply so that you are ready to go when the time comes.
Yeah, and even going a little further than that, I would just say getting to know the program on a larger scale. What I like to do for prospective students is set up a day for them to just kind of have a life as a student at the University of Georgia, where they get a lesson with me, they come sit in with my trombone ensemble, and they get to know the other members of the studio, maybe sit in on a large ensemble and have a rehearsal and perhaps even observe a class if they'd like to do that. And that way they walk away with kind of a hands-on feel for what it would be like to be at the University of Georgia. Or the school of their choice. And what I tell a lot of students is that you would never, or hopefully you would never just buy a car by looking online. You'd want to test drive it. And so why would you treat your college education any differently? And I totally agree with the idea of starting earlier. I would say sophomore year is as good a time as any as to start establishing contact. And just because someone's a great name doesn't mean they might not be the best fit. So getting a lesson with them, and do you feel comfortable with them? Do you feel like you can learn from this person? And then is the environment what you want it to be? Is it a healthy competitive atmosphere, or is there a little bit of toxicity there, and that's all helpful information for you to know going into it. So.
Yeah, I agree with all of those things. I mean, I think starting early is great, and I think contacting the teacher is sometimes a scary move, especially if you don't know this person and you have to make that cold call or email and introduce yourself. Certainly, it helps to have a referral or another student that has studied with that teacher, or perhaps your current teacher knows that person. I mean, those are all connections that can help. But occasionally, you just have to make that email to someone that you've never you don't have that connection with. But usually, teachers are very happy to get to know you and meet you. I mean, of course, teachers are busy and they may not be able to respond right away, but don't let that discourage you from just keep trying. And I mean, just sort of going further, but think about, or just be aware of every college's audition entrance, the what's required for the audition, because as it gets closer to you're in your senior year of high school, you want to just have that repertoire in mind. I know for violin, for example, a lot of schools ask for a movement of a concerto and a movement of Bach. Or a free choice. So along those lines, and I see that in a lot of college audition requirements. So you want to present your strongest material and think about that fairly early.
So, Hillary, please, yeah.
I was just going to also say to consider and to take a look at the different degree options, the type of degrees that are offered, because that will help you narrow down your search for schools. Because you have things like conservatories that are really focused on the performance side, or maybe you want a more liberal arts degree, or you want a Bachelor of Arts with an emphasis in music, or perhaps you want a music business degree or a minor in something. There's a wide range. I mean, you have 3 performers here in front of you, right? Or 4, counting John, sorry. 4 performers in front of you right now. So we're giving you suggestions based off of primarily on there, but all of our schools have degrees that are not performance centric. And I mean, I teach students who are not necessarily provide music ed majors. I have Bachelor of Music, Bachelor of Arts and Culture students. We have different degrees, and other schools even offer other ones. So especially when you're not talking about the elite conservatory level schools, you have a much bigger range of options of degree. And as Gregory was just saying, if you are like, the different audition repertoire will change dramatically based on which type of program you're auditioning for. If you are looking for a major in arts and culture, you're going to have a much pared down repertoire list than if you were auditioning for Juilliard, for example. So that would make a difference in your preparation.
And of course, I mean, have an idea of what you want to do in life, as a career in music. You may not know 100%, but you may think, oh, I'd love to be playing in an orchestra full time, or I'd like to be teaching the college level, or teaching a high school, a band director, orchestra director. So that will help you make, those choices in the degree programs, because if you want to teach, high school or elementary school music, then you'll have to probably have a BME, Bachelor of Music Education. And if you're thinking about, college teaching, then you're thinking, okay, I'm going to go all the way to the doctorate level to have those options. So that's... Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Greg. Just before we leave this, I would just say that, going along with what both Greg and Hillary have said, is just that give some thought as to what you want to do. And yeah, it doesn't have to be perfectly formed out, but, sometimes it's really important to ask yourself, what role do you want music to play in your life? And when a student comes to college and ultimately changes their major, the overwhelming reason given is something dealing with I've lost my passion, or this kind of thing. And basically what that is just not understanding the fact that when you take something and you decide you want to make it your profession, that it is a discipline. And if you just enjoy picking up your horn or your instrument and just playing a few notes versus actually wanting to pursue a career in music, whether as an educator or as a performer, and let's be honest, we're all both, to some degree, that's okay. Some of the best musicians I know, they do it on the side. And I've had students come in before for an audition, and the reason they're there is because they want to be a part of the marching band. And it's like, it's a revelation when I say, you don't have to be a music major to be in the marching band. It's okay. Go be a geneticist and play in the marching band. And that's fine. But just give some thought as to what role you want music to play in your life, and understand that, and this gets into kind of a different topic altogether, that it's okay that it's not all sunshine and roses. It is work, and that is okay.
I'm so glad you said that. Anything you're going to go for in life, if you're going to try and do really well at it, it's going to be work. You need the work to get better at it. And I think a lot of times, especially because it's this, we play, right? And it is, we love, but that doesn't mean, I'm sorry, you're going to have to practice your scales, and that may not be fun.
And with that, I think it's a cliche that I think it has all the good intentions, but it's actually very misleading. Choose something you love to do for a living, and you'll never work a day in your life. And it's like,
I hate that expression.
And I'm like, no, that is not true. I mean, whatever you want to do, it takes effort and it takes work, and hopefully in that work you'll find an even deeper love for what you're doing and appreciation for it.
Yeah, a lot of colleges have, the option of minoring in music, or say taking lessons as a non-music major for credit. So I've taught, music minors and non-majors, and some of the really wonderful musicians and love playing the violin, but decide they don't want to do it as a career. So just know you have those options, even if you're thinking you're not going to do music, but you want to continue your instrument. That you're very likely able to continue music for credit, perhaps, or play in it like an orchestra as well.
And I think the reason I said that in the first place is because occasionally a student will show up for an audition, and it's clear they've done no homework. And when you ask them, I mean, the number one question I ask is, why are you interested in a career in music? And it's like, well, I don't know anything else I'd like to do. And it's like, well, that's not a ringing endorsement for the kind of what you're going to be bringing to the table. And you got to have one of three. You got to have a combination of a sincere desire, a great work ethic, or natural talent. I need two of those three. Okay. And if you're not interested, you don't know what else you want to do, and you don't have a large degree of natural talent, that's a recipe for disaster, So, and I say that with love, not with like, anger or anything.
Okay, so I love that, the three things, but the third one you said was the natural talent. You'd be amazed by people who have natural talent. If they don't develop that work ethic, they don't get very far.
Right.
They make it to a certain point, and then it does. So you got to learn to work too.
Yeah, you got to have two of those three. So absolutely.
So we're getting so many, we're hitting so many different topics here. I mean, I'm hearing no, it's wonderful. I'm making a list of like, okay, this is a class, and this is a class, and this, I mean, we could just go on and on with this. And just so that we can get to the next thing, I want to hit a couple of bullet points of what's been said. And also I put it up on the scroll here a couple times, but if any of the students or anyone watching this has a question for the faculty here, please just ask in the comments on whatever platform you're watching this on, and we'll get to the question. So some of the things I tell students that I share in classes when I do this, to get to the question of what are you looking for, some of this has been said, so I'm just going to skip over it. But look at the location, and really, I think the conversation it's important that you have a really honest conversation with yourself and with your family about what you want and what you're comfortable with. Going to New York and going to one of the New York or any big urban conservatory might be really appealing to somebody, and it might be completely terrifying to somebody else. And that's okay if it's terrifying to you. You don't have to go to those schools. Although, as I look on the screen here, I see a lot of us that did go to some of those places. You absolutely don't have to. And as a matter of fact, I think it can be really detrimental when students base their decision on, well, that's where my teacher went, or that's where my friend went. I also think it's, I would always joke at George Mason, where I teach percussion, that if we just changed our name to the George Mason Conservatory of Music, I think our admissions numbers would triple overnight, because there's this idea that students have that the word conservatory somehow implies quality. And I will say this, and I'll speak on my own here, that is the furthest thing from the truth. And that there are a huge array of institutions that have incredible teachers and great orchestras and great wind ensembles and often chamber programs that are doing really creative things that are at big state universities or small private colleges or anything in between. And if you're basing your choice on a name or specifically, well, they say conservatory, so that must mean they're good, that's probably a bad idea. And the last thing I'm going to say, and then I want to kind of move us forward just a little bit, is I always encourage students to go, every university, a lot of universities do these sort of shadow days or behind the scene music student days or all of that. And those are great, and you should absolutely do those. But if you can, try to show up to campus, assuming these days you can go to campus, and that's a whole other conversation. Try to go on a day that's not an organized sort of
absolutely
day, right? Because we all do those shadow days, and those are the days that our studios get cleaned and the trash gets taken out, and we put our best foot forward because we want to recruit you. But just go to campus on a Tuesday, like February when it's really cold, and everyone right after finals, and walk around campus and see if you feel comfortable with that vibe, because that's when you're going to know really what the institution is like, not on the the pretty fall open house day that we all
also on a beautiful day and see if anybody's in the practice rooms.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to talk about just real fast, Gregory mentioned, and maybe others did too, this idea of reaching out to faculty and communication. And I think it's important for us just to touch on a little bit some things, and I think we could talk about communication, and I think we could connect that to a resume and correspondence in general that students should have with faculty, and what is appropriate and what is inappropriate, and not just in terms of the writing, but how you address somebody and maybe the platforms to use to communicate with faculty. So toss all of that out there for anyone that wants to pick any of that up.
Yeah, I'll just say, I would prefer an email over a Facebook message or a text or something like that. Okay. And I just think, I feel like I'm auditioning for you right off the bat, and I hope that you feel the same. And it starts with our communication with each other. If I take 4 weeks to reply to your email, I'm giving you I'm giving a bad impression of myself. Okay. Likewise, if you communicate to me in text speak, or your writing is poor, or there's a lot of assumptions in your email, I'm inferring from that as well. And so if you have a private teacher, and if you're considering going on to study music, I would say you should have a private teacher at this point. Use them for more than just learning how to play your instrument. Use them for learning how to craft an email or a message to a prospective teacher that puts yourself in a good light. And I know plenty of private teachers that do that with their students, and they always shine. So I don't want to answer the whole thing. Let me leave it for other people.
I think it's good to show your interest in the school and the teacher, and maybe wanting a trial lesson if they have time. And it varies from teacher and school to school and teacher to teacher, because some teachers may not have time to give you a lesson right before your audition. So I would actually recommend you reach out earlier, maybe in the fall, or not even before your senior year, to meet the teacher. Because audition days can be very busy for a lot of teachers, and they may be able to fit you in a day of or before, but not necessarily. And it just gives you time so that not everything is like stressed for both sides.
Yeah, I agree with everything. Just reiterate that, especially before you are formally studying with any teacher, every interaction that you have with another professional, you should consider like a job interview. You want to present yourself in your best light. So if you would not send that email or text drafted that way to somewhere you are applying for a job, you shouldn't send it. So be polite, be respectful, no hey yous or hey, I want this. You should address with respect and put yourself in the best light possible. I also, a little personal pet peeve of mine, but I cannot tell you how many emails I get a year from students asking what the audition repertoire is when it's on our website.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're all busy people. I am happy to respond to you. I will respond to you, but please, it just, again, it doesn't look good on you. If you had spent 5 minutes digging, you could have found the answer to that question. So take some time.
Right. It shows that they just haven't done their homework and they
want me to do the work for them. And, you can come and study with me and I will do my best, but I can't practice for you. You have to do the work, right? So I can give you all the ingredients, but guess what? Those ingredients are already on our website, what my audition repertoire requirements are. Now, if you have a specific question beyond that, like, it says a concerto, but I've been working on this sonata. Would it be possible to substitute the sonata instead of that? That would be totally fine. Again, especially if you're asking respectfully in a nice way, if it's the language is good. As far as resumes, you mentioned resumes go, have someone else look over them. There are some wonderful resources out there. Look at, so I'm thinking of Eastman and Peabody, both have websites with resources that you can download sample resumes. Get one of those and use it as a model. We're not expecting you, especially depending on if you're undergrad coming in from high school or even a grad student, to have all the things that a professional resume would list, but organize it in that way to show what you have. And then have someone that you know and trust that's a professional look over it, not just your friend.
If you're looking for sample resumes online, I don't know how easy it is to find like music resumes or ones that are more relevant to you. Because a lot of the ones you'll find of like, being an engineer or something or applying for an engineering job, and it may be harder to figure out how to structure your resume or CV and what your category is going to be.
So we have a question here. I'm sorry, Greg. We have a question here about this specific topic. So if we could just take a moment and talk about resumes, which I know you were doing and I interrupted you, so I'm sorry. But just kind of to drill down on this for a second, how each of us or whomever, starting with Gregory, wants to answer kind of how you have your students structure the structure it, right? So what does it start with? What information is on there? What information is really not super relevant? I mean, I always think it's kind of funny when somebody's not funny, it's sort of charming when somebody tells me they were a Boy Scout or honor society, but I'm mostly interested in what they do.
Now, if I can just,
Boy Scouts or anything.
I will say, if someone has achieved like Eagle Scout status, I think that's very interesting because that shows a level of dedication that can absolutely transfer. I'll just say, keep it to a page, keep the formatting very consistent. You want to know, I want to know, your education, basically what high school you're going to, who your teachers are, band directors, private teachers, any notable accomplishments, for example, prominent performances or, honor bands or whatever. And maybe even things like a little bit of your academic background, your GPA and, test scores, if you're comfortable sharing that. But because, unfortunately, that is part of the admissions process. And then
I guess share it if it's a good GPA. Yeah, maybe don't share it if it's not so great.
And as far as like what not to share, I don't necessarily, and I mean, I don't mean this in a flippant way, but I see it a lot. I'm more interested. I mean, if the band has done some very notable things like BOA champions or a performance at Carnegie Hall or something like that, great. But I don't need a rundown of every competition that the marching band has gone to and earned superior ratings. And this is a whole different topic, but I'll say I think the largest jump that a student mentality has to make between high school and college is in high school, the hub of all musical activity is the band. What is the band doing? The band, the band, the band. And you go to college and it's about the studio. And your musical ensembles are like labs for what's going on at the studio level. And so I'm more interested in you, the musician, not necessarily the band. So you let your resume speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, so go ahead. Actually, go ahead.
I would ask you to, going back to what we talked about earlier, what is it you're looking to do? Well, what are you applying for? Are you applying for master's? Are you applying for a doctorate? Are you applying for an undergraduate degree? Is it performance-based? Is it music ed? So ask yourself whatever that degree program is, and this is true out in the real world too. If you're applying for an orchestra job versus you're applying for a college job, you're going to prepare that resume differently. I have multiple different resumes because they are 1 page long, and you want to put the relevant information for that position, for that degree.
Yeah.
So you want to showcase the skills that you have and the experience that you have in those areas in a concise of a format as possible. So, if it's about going to an undergraduate performance degree, yes, have your GPA. I would have your teacher studied with, your chamber music experience and orchestra experience section, any solo recitals that you've given or notable awards you've won. If you're going to be going for music ed, maybe have some of there. If you've done any working with children, if you like what your organizational skills, things. If you were secretary of your high school chess club, maybe list that there. Like the things that you have done that showcase the skill sets that will make you successful at that school or in that degree or in that job. That's what they want to see on there.
And just formatting in each section, if it hasn't already been said, just reverse chronological order, most recent going back. It's really easy for the eye to scan over. No offense, I'm not going to take an hour to look over your resume, and no, I don't expect anyone to take an hour and look over mine. So you just want it to be where like the real salient points just jump off the page really quickly to the eye.
Yeah, I was going to say like easy to find information because, like you said, we don't have a lot of time to look through, more than 5 minutes usually. So, obviously the name and contact on the top. I usually don't put date of birth or age, but contact like email, maybe phone number if you wish. And the most important thing after that, what you think is most important, like for me, it might be the degrees I have and what I'm doing now. Currently, I'm teaching at this university in concertmaster of the Oklahoma City Philharmonic, because that's the most current thing. That's what I want to know, even from anybody, like, what are you doing now, or what degrees do you have? And then after that,
yeah.
Sorry?
Who your teachers were that you studied with, your primary teachers, list those.
Yeah.
And it's a great question because I've seen students, and I mean, I understand. I don't fault the student because I try to think back to what I knew and more importantly what I didn't know when I was their age. But students will send me a prose resume where they're writing everything out in like a paragraph format, and it's just actually that's harder to do, I think. So
yeah, and the only other thing I would just tip in is to include if you've done any kind of summer programs, either longer programs like Swanee or others, or if you've done a week-long seminar, or now there's more. I think even weekend things. If you did a viola summit and you played in a class there, I think that would be an interesting. I mean, I would think Hillary, right? That would be an interesting thing to share. And for any of our instruments, if you've done instrument-specific weekend events where you've performed, having that on there as well. We're getting some questions now about, and I think I made somebody who is an Eagle Scout angry, so I apologize to all my Eagle Scouts out there, but we're getting some questions about college positions and actually kind of moving us along a little bit on the path. So there's a lot more to talk about at the undergraduate level. And I would just remind everybody to make sure that, you know, when you walk into the room that you look professional, right? And dress professionally, and that you hand, I mean, I love it when a student walks up to me with a repertoire packet and hands me, you know, their resume, and then I can open it and I can see the excerpts they're playing and the solo pieces they're playing, and whether it's a binder or whatever. I mean, for percussion, there's always a lot of stuff because there's a lot of different instruments that might not be as relevant for other instrumental areas, but for mine, it's not. For my area, it's nice. And also at my school, we have 4 percussion faculty. So, you know, we're all sitting at a table and kind of passing the book around to see everybody. And even though as the director of the program, I'm probably going to know the student auditioning because we've had some interaction, my colleagues, this might be the first time they've met you. And the same for others here. If there are multiple people in the audition room, there could be one person with a lot of connection there, but the rest of them don't. And so that resume and that audition packet allows you to make a really strong impression on a student, on the committee. So, yeah, Gregory, do you have one more?
Also, you know, when you're with sort of related to this resume thing, you know, if you are applying for a university college teaching position, they may ask for a CV, which can be a lot more involved and detailed than a one-page resume. If you're applying for an orchestra job, it's likely they'll say just send a one-page resume, but a CV, you know, gives you the opportunity to list in more detail. And my CV is, you know, several pages. I forgot how many. It's quite long because I have decided to put, you know, every performance and everything in there. But that does take some time, and you have to, you know, craft it carefully.
So in talking about, let's just move quickly. We have about a half an hour left in our chat to graduate schools and selecting graduate programs. There was a question on here or a comment from one of our folks watching about the different types of degrees that they have. So I'm going to say that they have an undergraduate in performance. They're in the process of getting their Master of Arts in Music Education, and they'd like to do a doctorate in composition. And the question is this a good pathway for becoming a college professor, having different degrees in different fields showing a versatility of work? Is that a potential path for a collegiate position? Any of you want to grab at that one?
Yes, I think by and large,
hard to answer. Yeah,
a lot of schools are. I'll say this: no one starts. It's very it's very rare for someone to start at a huge institution where you got like my job right now is I teach trombone. That is it. Okay, my job before that, I taught all low brass, so trombone, tuba, euphonium. I was assistant with the marching band. I taught the jazz band. I taught a music appreciation course that met 3 days a week and a music theory course. Okay. So, and that was a smaller school. So they were looking for fewer people to do more, wear more hats. So with that in mind, having such a varied background would make you, I think, an attractive candidate for a situation where they're going to want you to do stuff with education and composition and maybe teach an applied studio. So I guess I would say you might want to just, is that what you want? I mean, do you want to, are you more interested in wearing a lot of hats or just wearing one hat? My grandmother thought I had taken a step backwards in my life when I went to UGA, and she was like, "Wait, so you're just doing trombone?" And I was like, "No, that's a promotion in my mind."
In my world, promotion.
She was like, "Well, you were doing all this other stuff," and I was like, "Well, I just want to do trombone. That's all I want to do." So I guess it kind of depends on what you want, for your career.
Sometimes you don't have a choice because a lot of entry level, or if you're trying to just get a job. That may be a smaller school, you will have to be teaching something other than your major instrument. So keep that in mind, even if you don't have degrees in different areas, that's something that will help you get your foot in the door, is teaching at a smaller college and teaching more than just your instrument.
Yes. Know what you want in the end, what your goal is in the end. And of course, things change. Like I actually didn't think I wanted to be a university professor, and here I am, and I'm really happy I am. But your goals may change, your realizations may change of what you love to do as different opportunities open for you, but it's good to have a goal, what you're aiming for. So in that scenario, which you just described, if the thing that I'm thinking of that's different from what's been said or just additional, yes, those entry-level jobs tend to be multi-hat scenarios. When you go to the next level, once you start getting to a flagship state school, they tend to want people who have a terminal degree in that specific field. Mm-hmm. So if music ed is your first love, you might want a music ed doctorate program, not the composition, because then you're eligible primarily for a composition professor job, not the other two. Although it may very well help you get that first job. So having that variety is helpful for that first job, but make sure that terminal degree is in the one that you would, if you have to pick one you want, that's what it would be. Yeah. That also, most doctoral programs have like a second track or a minor type of situation that you could have. So you could do music ed and have a composition minor in your doctoral program, so I would just make sure that you plan that accordingly.
And I almost said this in the orchestra discussion on Monday, but I think it's applicable for this as well. I think we tend to be so focused on applying for jobs that we rarely stop to ask ourselves, would I want to do that job if I got it? And so that's not to say you can't have a lot of enjoyment. If you have equal emphasis and interest in education and composition, then there's probably a situation out there that'll work for that, but if not, if your main goal is just making sure that you're versatile, just hopefully you do have a high level of enjoyment in it as well, so.
It's fair to say, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that universities, when you're applying for university position, they look at your terminal degree, and just so we're all clear on what we're talking about, the terminal degree in music is either a DMA, Doctor of Musical Arts, or a PhD. It's that kind of the final degree you get, and is the term, and that's what the school will look at first. So they, you might not even pay that much attention to where you did your undergraduate, at least not initially when they're screening the applications. But they look to see if you have a DMA, and that's, maybe we could talk about that a little bit, to do the DMA or not. Which I have a very strong opinion about, which is probably in the minority. But so they look at the DMA, and then they may look at the other things. So I think to just underscore what has been said here, that make sure that your final degree is in what you really believe is your focus area, which is why I often encourage students that are unsure about what they want to do in their path in music to start with a music education degree, because an undergraduate in music ed is a really strong platform for you to go in a number of different directions in a master's and in a DMA. And so if you have your undergraduate in music ed and a master's and a doctorate in performance, that undergrad in music ed is still going to mean that there are things that you can teach in that first college job that for example, that I might not be able to teach because both of my degrees are in performance. So I think if you're thinking about a university position as an end goal, it's not the only way to do it, but I've heard this advice from enough people that I believe it's fair to say that an undergraduate in music ed is a smart place to start. And again, not to dominate this, but particularly in the instrumental band world, right? I mean, that may be not as true in string world and vocal music ed and all that, but I think in band world, it helps a lot, that degree.
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like there's sometimes a stigma associated with music ed degrees, like students who do those degrees aren't great performers, which is unfortunate. So don't be deterred by that if you've heard that stigma. If music ed is what you want to do, then you should go for it. And the other thing I was thinking of when John was mentioning about terminal degrees and college jobs is certainly not every college. I mean, you can still get a teaching job without a DMA. That's definitely plenty of people in that position, and especially when you're the big conservatories, right? Most of the faculty there don't have doctorates. Juilliard, like if you're going to apply to a teaching job at Juilliard, if you have a great solo career, that's the most important thing. So yeah, it does depend on the school. what they're looking for. The job description will sometimes say DMA preferred or DMA required, and so that's what you want to look at.
And a lot of schools, I mean, certainly not, I don't believe in conservatories, but I know most public universities will at least require a master's degree before you can teach, regardless of your level of professional experience.
It tends to be, I don't want to say this without like offending any schools out there, but it tends to be the smaller the school, the more they require the terminal degree. The bigger they get, or the larger. But then when we're talking about, like John just said, the conservatory, or sorry, Gregory just said, the conservatories, like they're not looking for people who went straight into teaching. They're looking for people who had a professional quartet that traveled the world for 10 years, and then they're going to move into teaching. Or they were the principal player of the Chicago Symphony for 15 years, and then they decided to take up teaching. So, you know, that's a very heavy, intensive performance career path that then transitions into teaching. That, in my experience, that's a smaller percentage. I think most of the teachers out there come through, you know, the ranks, so to speak.
Well, and you know, a lot of those universities, so very, very quickly, but a lot of the conservatories don't have the same tenure/ranking process that a university would. So like the Juilliard example, but if you're teaching at Juilliard, you know, it's everybody's adjunct there, because they know that, you know, half the faculty are touring and have their own solo careers, and maybe, you know, come once a week to, this is going to be an example, of course. I mean, that's just the way a lot of those conservatories work. So, you know, more than likely, if you are entry level, you're looking at a, you know, public university where there is a tenure track system.
Well, and one of the things about I mean, Gregory, you brought up tenure, and I think if we're talking about, obviously, if we're now getting into this discussion of college positions, and we've got about 10, 12 minutes left here, or a little bit more than that, you know, understanding the different types of positions. So there could be full-time positions at universities that, you know, have all of the benefits and salary and all of that, but they're not tenure track, right? So they don't, at the end of a certain period of time, you're not granted tenure. There are some universities, and honestly, I mean, I'm curious others' thoughts here. One of the things I'm seeing is universities in the arts, especially, trending a little bit away from tenure. You know, that schools are starting to get into wanting to do long-term contracts that give a sense of security, but also give some flexibility in both directions, both for the faculty and also for the university. You know, it used to be that the thing that distinguished somebody was they had a DMA, and then everybody at all these universities started to get DMA programs, and so now everybody that applies, you know, for every position has a DMA, and so trying to distinguish candidates using that criteria alone has become more difficult, even just in the last, I don't know, 10 years than it was, you know, when I first started in higher ed. So yeah, I don't really have a question there, but I just kind of threw it out as a topic.
Well, I think that goes back to, we were talking earlier with the undergrads, how you build your resume is to thinking about what they want you to be able to do to be successful in that path. So it's the same here. I get students who are, like, you know, currently seniors in college, and they're thinking about, they eventually want to be a college professor. Well, if you want to be going that route, you need to be thinking, okay, the school wants to know that you can teach. They want to know that you are organized. They want to know that you're going to be a good colleague. They want to know that you can play. And so, I mean, this is for a performance-based job, of course. If we're talking about a theory teacher job, that would be something slightly different. But look at what those jobs that you're interested in, just take a look at the higher education chronicle applications. What are they asking for that job to do, and start developing those skills in yourself, get experience in that. So go schedule some recitals in communities, maybe form a chamber music group, or form a nonprofit chamber music society and bring in concerts, apply for a grant and get these concerts going in your town. These are things that are going to, again, it's work, right? You are putting in work that maybe you're not getting paid for, but all of those things are giving you the experience and showing that when you walk in, you're one of 300 people applying for that job, that make you stand out, and they say, oh, this person's already doing it. Don't wait until you get the job to start
Yeah,
doing
it's too late. It's too
right.
late.
It's too late. You're not going to stand out from anyone.
Well, and that's if 99% of your activity is under the umbrella of academic institution that you're attending, you're not going to separate yourself from the pack in any shape or form. So, competitions, festivals, chamber groups, solo recitals that you set up on your own, winning orchestral auditions, even regional orchestra auditions, all of these. Publishing. So for us, I mean, you don't need to be a musicologist to publish. You can start with every instrumental magazine has like record reviews. You can start submitting record reviews, CD reviews, whatever, and then move towards maybe trying to do some arranging and try to get that published. And just all of this stuff speaks to your drive and your level of entrepreneurship that that stuff will jump off the page.
Join your instrumental societies, join the American Viola Society, get involved, or the American String Teacher, go to their conferences, apply to present something at those conferences, get to know those people, all of that networking, all of those skills, those are things that are really good. Even the networking, you go to these conferences, you meet people, then they're one of the people on the committee interviewing you when you're trying to apply.
And actually, when my committee, well, not my committee, this person wasn't on the committee, but when I interviewed at the University of Georgia, I finished my teaching and recital portion of the day, and someone runs up from the audience, and she's on faculty, and we actually went to Swanee together. And she was like, I was so amazed to see that you were coming here. I was so excited to see that you were going to be, interviewing.
Well, that means everyone needs to come to Swanee, and you will automatically have a career in music. That's
there you go. That's it.
Everybody that comes to Swanee. I'm just kidding. Before I get
it's a small world. I mean, it's scary. Like how like you mentioned, the networking is so important, and it's something. I mean, I wish I would have done more of. Of course, back then there wasn't the Facebook and all of that. But I mean, I remember when I first came to Swanee and as faculty and meeting John, it's like, wait, you look familiar. I remember you from Juilliard, right?
Yeah.
And it's just scary. And so I think one thing, I guess, if there's one regret or something I wish I'd done more of, was the networking and taking advantage of opportunities while still in school. Doing these extracurricular or doing composer projects or collaborating with more people. I mean, not just for resume building, but for experience.
And it's not, I struggled with this, and sometimes I still struggle with this, the line between schmoozing and responsibly networking and self-promotion versus bragging, but I'll say this, you have to think of yourself as your product, and if you're not refining your product, and if you're not responsibly promoting your product and networking your product, no one else is going to do that for you. Now, you don't want to be all hat and no cowboy. I mean, hopefully you can back it up.
Wait. Say that again, because that
all hat and no cowboy.
All hat and no cowboy. All right, I'm taking that. Thank you, Josh.
Or cow person. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, yeah. So I like that. That's good. I think I want to just underscore everything that's been said right now by just maybe with the phrase "have a plan for your career." And I'm always astonished, as somebody who probably fell somewhere in between I sort of like to network and schmooze a little bit and feel comfortable doing that, but also I want to make sure that whatever I am doing, I could you could back it up, the hat and the cowboy thing that Josh was referring to. But, the students that just don't really have a plan, and they think that I'll get my DMA and then I'll get started, or I'll get my master's degree and I'll get started. If you're not going through and joining College Music Society and your instrumental society and going, okay, where could I present here? Where could I publish? I mean, trust me when I say this, all of these journals that are published, all these online things, they're looking for content. I mean, if you've got to put out a magazine once a month or even a quarterly periodical, I mean, that's a lot of pressure to fill that. So if you're not looking at your resume really strategically, I'll just use myself as an example as a professional. When I first started teaching at Mason, after a couple of years, I looked at my resume and I went through my CV and I said, what am I missing? What are the things in my CV that I don't have that I know other colleagues do have? And then how can I correct those things? So at that point, it was international, right? I didn't have a lot of international teaching work. And so I figured out how to make that happen. So now I do. So when you look at my CV, you see, a couple, 3 or 4 different, specific instances of international work. So everybody should be doing that. You should be going through your bio. You should be going through your CV. You should be going through your information, especially if you want a college job. Even an adjunct position, quite frankly, it doesn't even really matter at this point, whatever type of teaching position you want, and making a list of what you don't have and that other people do. So I didn't get this job or that job. Why didn't I get it? Was there a specific thing? I know for me, and I'll be curious from others here, a big part of the reason why I got my job at Mason had to do with a perceived ability to recruit students. That they were looking for somebody that could recruit and build a program. And I think my experience there was different, so I'm not going to go into it, but I'd be curious for each one of you kind of to ask you what your day was like on your application day or your audition day for either the job you have, or if you want to use another university experience, that's fine. And kind of what you felt maybe distinguished you from other candidates, or what you were told from committees who said that this is why we hired you, because of X, Y, Z. Anyone wants to take that or start with that conversation?
I'll just say, the process at UGA was the interview was a 2-day thing. You showed up on the first day, and you had a rehearsal with like a 30-minute rehearsal with your accompanist, and with the collaborative pianist, and a dinner with the committee. The next morning at 7 a.m. It's just basically from 7 a.m. through about 5 p.m. A host of activities throughout the day. Breakfast with the director of the School of Music, and I don't know why it's some kind of sadistic rite of passage, but they really love performances to be at like 8:30 or 9 in the morning, just to see how well you play, I guess, early in the morning. So I did a 45-minute recital, followed right by an hour of teaching with two students, a graduate and an undergraduate, lunch with the committee, an hour of faculty drop-in, so that different faculty could come in and just, shoot the breeze for a bit, an hour with just the members of the trombone studio, Q&A, and what are my plans for the studio, etc. Meeting with the dean of the college, and an exit interview with the faculty, and then I was done about 5:30 p.m. and then right back to the airport. So as far as what they said, my teacher at Iowa, who is now he's the director of the School of Music and Dance at Michigan. He was an amazing mentor for me, and he instilled me with the confidence that from day one, he said, if you get to a point where they're interviewing you, you're going to get that job because you play great, you teach great, and you're a great human being, and that's going to be what wins your job. So you just have to get your resume to a point where they're going to be interested in talking with you. And so sure enough, the hiring committee said, and this is a very fascinating insight on the other side of the process. One of my brass colleagues, she said, on that day, she said, you really relax, if you get to the point where we've invited you to campus, we love your playing. We love your everything about what we've seen. We just want to make sure you're a good colleague, and that's it. And that you're as advertised, so we like you already. So just know that. And that actually put me really at ease, that I didn't feel like I had to prove anything, just, only that I hadn't lied on my resume.
So, well, okay. I mean, my day was pretty similar, I think. I don't remember the exact details, but I remember it being a 2-day thing, or 1.5 days, with pretty much everything you mentioned then. Yeah, it was a half-hour recital and a half-hour masterclass, and also the rehearsal. But I was amazed. I think nearly every meal was with someone on the committee or the whole committee. So I definitely felt on the spot the whole time, and I really realized how much they're looking for a good colleague, because these lunch, breakfast, dinner meetings, they were kind of like interviews, but they were also very late. But they just want to know me as a person, and that's something that it can be scary, as Josh said, but you just have to relax. But yeah, a lot of the time before the live interview, you might get a phone interview or a Skype interview, and so it's certainly good to prepare for that and think of all the questions that they might ask. Why have you decided to apply to this university, for example, or what are any of your strengths and weaknesses that you can describe, or I don't know, just kind of that's what I did in preparing. I just tried to write a list of as many questions I could think of, and think of how I would respond.
When I've been on the other side, and then Hillary, I don't mean to, I want to hear about your day too, actually, so.
Yeah, before I do, I just wanted to back up to something you were saying just before you asked the question. And I alluded to it earlier, so I just wanted to, it seems important to share. We've encouraged that you guys think ahead of what your perfect career path might be. But I'd like to share some advice that, as someone who was not intending to be where I am now, I went all through school. All of my education was spent going for a different career path. And I wanted to be an orchestral player. And just before I graduated, one of the teachers I worked with, Sinyan Huang, told me, she said, "Hillary, that is wonderful. That's what you want to do. But you need to understand that in order to be fulfilled as a human being, you are going to need to teach, and you're going to need to give recitals, and you're going to need to play chamber music too. So make sure you don't neglect those aspects." And she was so right. At the time I listened and yes, I agree. Of course, I respect you. I understand all that. But I hated performing solo recitals. I was such a nervous stage fright person that the thought of doing that was not what I wanted to do. And now here I am. That's basically what I do for my career. Like most of my performances that I give are either chamber music or solo recitals. And I do play orchestra, but honestly, my other things are so time commitment that I don't get to play with the orchestra very much at all anymore. I hardly play with them. So it's okay to not know for sure what you want to do right now. The point is that you will most likely have a career path that is, if you're going into music, is going to encompass a wide range of things. You are going to need to play. You are going to need to play solo. You're going to need to play with other people. Have good people skills, be nice to people, right? You're going to need to get your skills playing as best you can, but you're also going to need to learn to write and present yourself well, either because you need to write a grant to fund your program that you're going to be applying for, or because you need to be getting a college teaching job. But you need to develop all those skills. So don't think that you are just going to go and be a soloist, or you are just going to be a quartet player. It's not going to be just one thing. So develop a wide range of skills. And then that follows into this in the teaching job. When you're applying for teaching, if you're going for that, I suggested that you look at what you need to be successful for the job, what they want you. That means not just what they want in the application, but from the other side, not just from when I actually interviewed for my job, but when I have sat on interview panels for other colleagues at UT. We are looking for someone that we want them to be a good colleague and they're going to get along, but we want to know that they're going to get tenure. We don't want to go through the process again in 3 years because they failed and burned out. So go look at those institutions, and I don't care if it's an adjunct job or whatever, but go find their handbook and find out what the tenure policies are for someone at that school, and see what types of things they expect you to do. Do they expect you to publish articles? Do they expect you to record a CD? Those are the things you should be trying to do before you ever apply for the job. So that they'll be like, yep, they're already tenured. We know we've got them. Like, they're not going like, as long as the fit is there, that we know that they'll be successful.
And the more research in general, it's a great point. When people come interview for a job and we ask them about the university and they don't know, It's like, we had a great candidate once. Sorry, I'm getting a little feedback from Hillary, who came in and interviewed for a position, and they had put together an entire recruiting plan for their area. So because there was a question we were asking about recruiting, and they were like, well, here's what I would do. And they went through like, programmatic marketing and institutional recruiting, and, how they would do school visits and how they would structure the social media for that area. And it was like this really thoughtful and impressive thing that I guarantee they had not learned in their instrumental studio class, right? So like they clearly had learned this and thought about this in another way. And I think the idea of having a plan for your career is really important to add to that, to have a life, prepare for a life in the arts. Like you want to be prepared for a life in music. And I think we're all living in a world right now that none of us prepared for. So we're all improvising, and we're all trying to figure out how to teach and perform and communicate and stay connected with each other, which is nothing that we learned how to do in school, or even learn how to do in the beginning of the calendar year. And I thought the worst thing was to get fired in Australia. And it's like, remember those? And that was a bad thing. We got to wrap up here. I want to just, Josh, do you want to say something?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of feedback. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just this idea that, again, exactly what Hillary said, that when you're reading the job description, you should ask yourself if you can do those things. Like if it's, I can teach trombone, I can do marching band, I have no jazz experience, but maybe that won't be that big a deal. I can do 4 out of the 5 things, so I'm going to apply for this. That you're not doing yourself or the search any service, because if you were fortunate enough to get the job, then guess what? You have to do it. And whether you're winning an orchestral position or a college teaching job, the number one thing is they want someone who can come in on day one and do the job with minimal to zero hand holding. I mean, there's not a handbook when you get the job of how to do the job. I mean, so that's why they always look for someone with at least a degree of experience that you can start getting now on a smaller scale. And some things that you're going to need when you apply, you're going to need a CV, a clean CV. You're going to need demonstrated live performance of a varied bit, like solo, chamber, whatever. You're going to need possibly some video samples of your teaching. Okay. And they might not want all of those things at the beginning, but you're going to have to give them at some point. And if you wait, and this was probably my biggest mistake, I waited until it was time to apply to get this stuff together. And you're already behind the 8 ball at that point. So you can start now cleaning up your product so that when it's time to apply for a job, that's actually not a very stressful endeavor to apply for the job, So, we all have a million things to say, so I'll just stop right there. So.
John, I think
I can't hear you.
I muted myself, and the button so many people in my life have wanted is a mute button, and I now have it. Hillary, please, you had something to share.
Yeah, I agree largely with what the chef's saying, because having sat on those committees, I see people who really haven't done anything. Like we want a teacher and a performer and an educator, and they've done hardly anything. So please don't apply when you're wasting a lot of time on yourself even. But I had to share, because I recently went through an implicit bias training for searches at the University of Tennessee that we're making everybody do. This was even before all the stuff that's going on now. But there was a study that was shared there that it's really stuck with me. And also just being in one of 4 here, and I'm the only woman on the panel right now, this study showed that men will apply for jobs if they fit 50% of the job prescriptions. If it was really low, I was not even lower, like 10%. If they feel like they can do one of the things on the list, men will apply. And women will not apply statistically unless they fit every box. So as just pointing out to all the women out there who are thinking about applying, if you fit some of those categories, give it a shot. Because
absolutely,
it might explain why there are there's fewer applications. Like, it may be, especially at those entry-level jobs, it may be that they are looking for a viola professor, but they are also looking for someone who can teach any XYZ class that we need filled. And maybe it's a theory class, but maybe they could find a way, if you are the best viola teacher there, then maybe they'd find a way for you to take on all the chamber music coordinations, and the bassoon professor could take on the theory role, right? Like, it's possible that those type of things could be shared. Now, if you are not capable of really teaching and playing the viola at a high level, then don't apply. But there are, yes, just sharing that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was specifically thinking of a circumstance where I had a student wanting to apply for a trombone and composition position, and I asked if he, have you ever written anything? And he said no. And I said, do you have any composition skills? He said no. And I said, well, how are you going to do that part of the job? And he's like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And I was like, that's not what they're looking for.
It's the guys who think they can do that.
Well, and that does make the point of what you said, Hillary, and I think it's an important one. And I think that there's definitely another entire discussion, or two or three or hundreds, to have about bias in the application process, selecting candidates. How do we fix that, and at what level? I'm sorry?
In everything. It's not just academia, but
no, but it is an issue. I mean, I know, and again, here, I don't want to, at the end of this, I don't want to launch us into another thing. And I also don't think that we're even the right panel to have this discussion, to be perfectly candid. But when I've been on searches, and I've been on 4 or 5 in the last couple of years, we've been adding a number of people to our faculty at Mason, and we've had the training, and we've done the implicit bias training that Hillary mentioned through our HR office, and all these other things. And it is still a challenge for us to find. It's a hard thing to do, and whether it's something that happens at the search process level, or needs to happen much earlier in the way that we train students and encourage students through the process, I think is something that we're all trying to reconcile and work on at our institutions. I know we're doing a lot right now at Mason, and I'm sure all other schools are doing quite a bit to have these discussions, and they're difficult ones to have because, we don't do a good job of it. And I'll just be very blunt and say that we don't do a good job. And whether we can solve that at the search level or we solve it earlier, I think we need to be discussing the whole range of things. So that's not an answer. That's a lot of empty words, but that's kind of where my head went when you brought that up, Hillary, because I think it's a huge and important point that needs to be discussed constantly. So thank you for bringing it up. I do want to wrap up because I promised I would be respectful of everybody's time. And so I want to thank all 3 of you. And if you want to if there's any quick last 10-second parting words that you want to leave our students with, please take a moment to do that now.
I guess I could just say, my feeling, and from my students' experience, I feel like getting a teaching job or an orchestra job is harder than most people think. So don't give up. I mean, I remember when I was applying for teaching jobs right out of college, I didn't get any responses, and I'd probably sent out a dozen letters or so. So that may happen and will happen, and you have to be, willing to get feedback from others to figure out how you can better yourself. Have a good cover letter, because the committee will read that and highlight what you think is unique about yourself. Don't just restate things that are in your resume or CV. But yeah, specifically about college teaching, be willing to accept a job that may not be your dream job, but maybe think of it as a stepping stone, or maybe something you end up enjoying and staying for the rest of your life. So that's really my only final thoughts.
I'll just say, to kind of echo what Hillary and Greg have said, I think it is absolutely essential that you fix your compass on a point that you're going to start walking towards for a career, but then just be open to where the road goes. And You know, if I say to myself, you know, I want to be an orchestral player that lives, full-time orchestral player that lives in Georgia, what I'm saying is I want to play in the Atlanta Symphony because that's the only full-time orchestra job. But if I say I'm willing to go where the road goes, and that might mean, you know, teaching at the University of Georgia and playing with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, I'm okay with that, you know, and I was fine walking that road. And Hillary said something similar, that she started out one way, but the road started going somewhere else, and you find fulfillment there. Absolutely. You know, so I just want to be encouraging and glasses half full on that. So
yeah, and take advantage. Talk to colleagues, reach out to people you maybe don't know. Generally, the music field is a very friendly profession. Talk to people and ask for advice. And if you are going the college route, as Gregory said, to be persistent and don't give up, I would encourage you, the College Music Society, join. But they have a mentorship program where you can submit your materials to someone who's a older professional in your field who can look over it and give you advice on how to clean it up if you are applying for things and not getting it. So maybe there's something in your materials that could be done differently, and that you can get advice from people that way.
Thank you all. I think at all stages, whether we started this discussion with undergraduates and we ended with applying for university positions, I think that the idea of being open and being willing to, you know, accept critique and also ask for help and ask for advice. I think students are so afraid these days to ask for help or advice because it may be a sign of weakness or a sign that they don't know something. Ask the questions, engage with people. If you see people in the field that you admire who are doing work that you really are excited by, find out how they got there. Ask them these questions. I mean, I find musicians and at every level and in every aspect of our field to be so open to wanting to help students engage with what they do. I mean, it's one of the joys of my career, right? Is to be able to help a student get to where they want to be professionally. And so the more that that you can engage with us and go to summer programs and ask questions, attend chats like this and be engaged with it, the better off you're going to be professionally. So I'd like to thank my colleagues and friends for this great chat. This series will continue next week with two favorite conductors at Swanee, Giacomo Baeros on Monday and Joanne Folletta on Wednesday. So I look forward to having a chance to visit with those two wonderful conductors and friends of the festival. And so until then, we'll be back with you at that time. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
bye.